On the night of September 1st, 1666, a baker named Thomas Fariner checked his ovens one last time before climbing the stairs to bed. His bakery on Pudding Lane was tucked into the heart of London, in a neighbourhood where timber houses leaned so close together their upper floors nearly touched across the narrow streets. The ovens were banked with ash, the fires dampened for the night. Everything seemed safe, but sometime past midnight, a spark found kindling. Within minutes, the bakery was engulfed. Within an hour, the entire street was ablaze. Within 6 days, the medieval city of London, the city of Shakespeare, of Chaucer, of 1,000 years of history, would be erased from the face of the earth. Over 13,000 houses would be consumed, 87 churches reduced to smoking shells, and St. Paul's Cathedral would melt into rivers of molten lead. Using advanced AI technology, we have transformed 17th century engravings and eyewitness sketches into photorealistic scenes. Today, you will walk the doomed streets of a wooden city in its final hours. You will witness how London fell and how from its ashes rose the modern city that would become the capital of the world. London in 1666 was home to approximately 500,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in Europe. But unlike Paris or Amsterdam, which were building in brick and stone, London was overwhelmingly a city of wood. Nearly every building was constructed with timber frames and walls filled with wattle and daub. The roofs were not slate or tile, but thatch, bundles of dried straw. After an exceptionally dry summer with almost no rain, this thatch was as combustible as gunpowder. The streets were narrow, twisting lanes, some barely wide enough for 2 men to pass. Houses rose 4, 5, even 6 stories high, each upper floor jutting out further than the one below. This created wooden tunnels that blocked out the sun and became perfect wind channels for fire. If you stood on London Bridge and looked north, you would see a dense forest of timber and thatch rising up the hills. The spire of St. Paul's Cathedral, at 489 feet before lightning destroyed it in 1561, still dominated the skyline, surrounded by over 100 parish churches. But you would smell London before you saw it clearly. The city had no sewage system. Waste was thrown into open ditches running down each street. Butchers slaughtered animals in the streets. The Thames was both lifeline and sewer, providing water while receiving all of London's waste. The city had just survived the Great Plague of 1665, which killed 100,000 people. Mass graves still scarred the suburbs. And now, in 1666, people whispered about prophecies. The number 666 was the number of the beast. Some preachers declared God's judgment was coming. They were right. Thomas Fariner was the king's baker. On the night of September 1st, his household went to bed as usual. Sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., fire began in the bakery. Fariner woke to find his staircase engulfed. He, his daughter, and 1 servant escaped across the rooftops. 1 maid was too terrified to jump. She became the fire's first victim. The fire spread with shocking speed. Next door was the Star Inn, with a courtyard stacked with hay for horses. Within minutes, the hay exploded into a fireball. By 3 a.m., an entire block was burning. Sir Thomas Bloodworth, the Lord Mayor, was summoned. The crowd begged him to authorize demolishing houses to create a firebreak, the only way to stop a major blaze. But under English law, if you demolished a house and the fire didn't reach it, you paid for rebuilding. Bloodworth looked at the flames and said, "Pish, a woman could piss it out." Then he went back to bed. By Sunday morning, September 2nd, the fire had consumed over 300 houses. It was now a quarter-mile wide, tearing through warehouses filled with oil, tallow, spirits, and coal. The Thames Street warehouses were packed with naval supplies, pitch, tar, and oil. When flames reached them, they exploded. Barrels of brandy and rum ignited, sending rivers of flaming liquid through the streets. The fire created its own weather, generating winds that sent burning embers hundreds of feet through the air, igniting new fires far ahead of the main blaze. Londoners fled in panic. The wealthy hired carts piled with furniture and plate. The poor ran carrying children and a few possessions. Roads out of the city became jammed with refugees. By afternoon, the fire reached London Bridge. The medieval bridge was a timber city unto itself, covered with houses and shops. For hours, Londoners hoped a gap in the bridge from an earlier fire in 1632 would act as a firebreak. But burning embers flew across, igniting both ends. Ships cut loose from burning wharves drifted downriver in flames. Samuel Pepys watched from a boat on the Thames. We saw the fire as only one entire arch of fire above a mile long. It made me weep to see it. The churches, houses, and all on fire and flaming at once, and a horrid noise the flames made. By Sunday night, the fire had consumed a swath nearly a mile long and half a mile wide, and it was still growing. On Monday, September 3rd, the fire reached the heart of the city. Cheapside, the wealthiest district, was home to guild halls, grand merchant houses, and the Royal Exchange, the commercial heart of England. The Royal Exchange, built in 1571, was a magnificent arcade where merchants traded cloth, spices, and shares. By Monday afternoon, it was gone. The lead roof melted, pouring down in silvery streams. Stone columns cracked and exploded from heat. Merchants wept as decades of wealth turned to ash. The fire was now so massive, it generated a fire tornado, a spinning column of flame that roared through streets, incinerating everything in its path. The churches began to fall. Their stone walls stood, but timber roofs ignited and heavy lead cladding melted. Molten lead poured into naves, pooling on stone floors. Heat so intense made stone crack and explode, sending fragments flying through smoke-filled air. One by one, the churches collapsed. St. Mary Le Bow, St. Bride's, St. Lawrence Jewry, each marked by the terrible sound of bell towers crashing down. King Charles II took command, riding through burning streets with his brother, the Duke of York. His presence, face blackened with soot, clothes singed, helped calm the panic. He authorized gunpowder to demolish houses more quickly. Teams of soldiers began blowing up entire rows ahead of the flames. The fire breaks were working slowly, but in the north and west, the fire advanced toward its ultimate target, St. Paul's Cathedral. Old St. Paul's Cathedral was one of the great buildings of medieval Europe. Construction began in 1087. For 6 centuries, it had been London's spiritual heart, over 600 feet long, with a nave 102 feet high. When fire threatened on Monday evening, the cathedral became a warehouse. Surely stone walls that stood for 6 centuries could resist fire. Booksellers brought their entire stock. Merchants brought valuables. Families brought treasures. The cathedral became a refuge, the last safe place. They were wrong. On Tuesday morning, September 4th, fire reached the cathedral. Surrounding timber buildings ignited. Scaffolding on the exterior caught fire, and flames climbed to the roof. The vast timber roof structure covered with lead began to burn. Lead melted at 621 degrees. Witnesses described molten lead pouring off the roof like a waterfall, running down into the street. Books in the crypt ignited. Stone columns, exposed to extreme heat, began to crack, exploding like cannon fire. John Evelyn witnessed it. The stones of Paul's flew like grenades, the melting lead running down the streets in a stream, and the very pavements glowing with fiery redness, so as no horse nor man was able to tread on them. By afternoon, the roof collapsed. The interior became a furnace. Medieval stained glass, carved choir stalls, tombs of kings, all consumed. The cathedral that witnessed 1,000 years of prayers was gone. The fall of St. Paul's broke London's spirit. If the great cathedral could burn, nothing was safe. By Wednesday, September 5th, the fire had burned for 4 days. It had consumed over 13,000 houses, 87 churches, 44 guild halls, the Royal Exchange, and St. Paul's. An area of 436 acres was gone. But the wind was dropping. The fire breaks were finally effective. In several areas, fire reached gaps it couldn't cross and burned out for lack of fuel. By Thursday evening, September 6th, it was out. Survivors emerged into an unrecognizable city. Where houses stood were now acres of rubble. Streets vanished under collapsed walls and ash. Heat had been so intense that rubble remained too hot to walk on days later. The official death toll was 6 people, absurdly low. The real number was likely hundreds, possibly thousands. Over 100,000 people were homeless. Refugee camps sprang up in fields outside the walls. But from the ashes, a plan emerged. Christopher Wren, a 34-year-old astronomer and architect, submitted a radical proposal: sweep away the medieval street plan and create a rational grid of wide avenues radiating from central plazas, a Baroque capital like Paris or Rome. It was never built. Property rights made it impossible. Londoners wanted to rebuild immediately, not wait years. A compromise was reached. Streets remained roughly the same, but buildings were regulated. Rebuilding acts mandated all buildings must be brick or stone. No more timber. Street widths standardized. Buildings classified by type with height regulations. Most importantly, Wren was commissioned to rebuild the churches. Between 1670 and 1711, he designed 51 new churches. And at the heart was his masterpiece, the new St. Paul's Cathedral. Wren's St. Paul's took 35 years to complete, finished in 1711 when Wren was 79. Built entirely of Portland stone, with a massive dome inspired by St. Peter's, but uniquely English. It stood 365 feet high, London's tallest building for over 200 years. The new St. Paul's was a statement. London had not just survived, it had been reborn. The rebuilt London was safer, cleaner, more orderly. Fire regulations became the model for building codes worldwide. The fire changed London psychologically. The medieval acceptance of filth and disorder was shaken. The new London became a city of coffee houses, insurance companies, and newspapers. The Bank of England was founded in 1694. Lloyd's of London emerged from the need to insure rebuilt properties. Modern financial London was born in the ashes. Wren's churches still dot the city today, stone islands surrounded by glass towers. The monument, a 202-foot column exactly 202 feet from Farriner's Bakery, still stands. You can climb its 311 steps and look over the city that rose from the ashes. St. Paul's survived another great fire, the Nazi Blitz of World War II. The famous photograph of the dome rising above smoke and flames became a symbol of British resistance. The Great Fire killed fewer than the Great Plague, but its impact was more profound. The plague left the physical city intact. The fire destroyed it, but opened the door to progress. The medieval world was a world of wood, organic, renewable, vulnerable. The modern world became a world of stone, brick, steel, permanent, fire-resistant, regulated. The Great Fire marked the transition. It also proved that even the worst disasters can be opportunities for renewal. A city that seemed permanent was erased in less than a week, and in its place, something better was built. London in September 1666 teaches us that cities are fragile. A spark in a bakery, a strong wind, a leader's fatal hesitation, and 1,000 years of history can vanish in days. Yet we rebuild. Always we rebuild. And often, what rises from the ashes is stronger and more enduring than what was lost. If you look at London today, at the dome of St. Paul's rising above the Thames, at the ordered streets and stone churches, you are looking at the legacy of 6 days in September 1666. You are looking at a city that burned to death and chose to be reborn. The Great Fire destroyed medieval London, but it created modern London. And that is a trade that, in the fullness of time, might have been worth making. Though try telling that to Thomas Fariner.